Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough. I'm Dr. Debbie Silber, and today's guest is Orit Krug. Orit is a board-certified dance movement therapist who specializes in helping women heal from past trauma and enjoy healthy lifelong relationships with their partners using her unique approach with dance therapy. For over 10 years, Orit has transformed the lives of more than 5,000 clients from 9 different countries. She's led thousands of therapy sessions with psychiatric patients who have gone from feeling suicidal to joyfully dancing and reigniting their desire to live again within less than an hour. Her popular free online video program, Wired for Love, has helped thousands break free from their unhealthy relationship patterns and experience positive transformations in their love lives. You may have heard me say the issues are in the tissues, and that's good to know, but what do we do about it? Well, my next guest, Orit, is going to show us an interesting and fun way to release all that trauma carefully and gently through dance movement therapy. If you're in pain due to trauma that's trapped inside, you're going to love this conversation. Here's Orit. Okay, everybody, we have Orit Krug with us today, and this is really interesting because personally, I've never experienced or even heard much about dance movement therapy, but I have the expert here who is going to be sharing so much about it. So welcome, Orit.
Thanks, Debbie.
We're just so glad you're here. So glad you're here. So let's just get started with just your personal story because my audience here, they want to know, have you been there? Have you experienced something? If so, we can hear what you have to say.
Yes.
So they're more gentle than that. I'm just teasing. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I experienced childhood trauma where I felt betrayed on a daily basis by the people in my family who, I felt like they were supposed to care for me and protect me. And, I really didn't feel that way much of the time, growing up with two older, very aggressive brothers. And that's pretty much how I went on to be in all of my relationships, being with emotionally unavailable men, aggressive men, being in unhealthy relationships. And I started a healing journey about 3 years before I met my husband. I was in talk therapy for 3 years. And then by the time I met my husband, I was like, wow, he is like an anomaly because he was the most gentle, sensitive, caring man I had ever, been with and gotten to know. And it was so different than any other relationship. And it was such a shock to my nervous system and to everything I knew, that I was just sabotaging it day in and day out. And even though I had been in talk therapy for 3 years at that point, I knew everything. I could connect the stories of how I was betrayed in the past, how I experienced childhood trauma, very strong connections between this is what happened in my past and this is why I'm behaving this way now. This is why I'm jealous. This is why I'm insecure. This is why I don't feel deserving of this man's love today. But no matter how much awareness I knew in my mind, I just couldn't control myself. I'd still send angry texts. I'd still just totally disconnect and ignore my husband when he disappointed me. And it didn't take much to disappoint me. And so, that was kind of my breaking point. Was one day about less than a year into our relationship, he broke up with me. I really had pushed him away. And I was just like, I need to do something. I need to do something different. I know everything I need to know about why I'm behaving this way, but I've actually got to change so that he believes I'll change. I'll believe I change. And that's when I decided to do dance movement therapy myself as a client.
And before you get into that, did you understand, or did you put it together that you were sabotaging your relationship because it was so different than what you knew, what you grew up with?
Yeah. So it was like a lot of it was because he was so calm and gentle. And because all the men that I grew up with, my family, were so explosive and unpredictable, I was just like, I just couldn't believe that he was actually calm and gentle. Like, I just kept waiting until he would explode or until he showed his true colors. And so I just constantly tested that, um, through different approaches. It was like an addiction for me to sabotage, and also just be like, all right, just flip out on me already, just yell at me, just hurt me already, because I know it's coming. And it never did. Of course, we have our normal relationship struggles and growths and all those amazing things, but it never happened the way I kept expecting it to, until I pushed him away and I was like, oh great.
And it's like self-fulfilling prophecy. And but during that amount of time, like, what did you make of that? Did you think there's just something wrong with this relationship because he's not exploding? Like, what did you think?
Yeah, I mean, there was a good amount of awareness that it was my trauma. So I did blame a bit of the relationship, but I also took a lot of the responsibility myself. Like, basically my pattern was, you're not doing this, or I need more reassurance from you, or I'm jealous. I was definitely too proud to say that out
Mm-hmm.
loud, but I would show that in different ways, and I would lash out at him.
Mm-hmm.
And then the regret would set in, where I was like, oh my God, he was just being a normal human being, he
Mm-hmm.
wasn't doing anything hurtful. And then I would just be filled with regret, and how am I going to change, and oh my gosh, I'm going to lose him, and just feeling like in a really vulnerable, difficult place.
Mm-hmm. So then, okay, so you said there was a breaking point, and that's when you realized, I really have to do something different. Out of all the things you could have done, what made you choose dance therapy?
Yeah. So I had just a year before, I had just graduated and got my master's in dance movement therapy.
Mm.
So I knew the power of the work. I knew that, that talking wasn't doing anything for me anymore at that point, and um, that I had all these old emotions and trauma stored in my body. And I was very well educated, because I was a dance movement therapist, that these patterns of behavior that I was doing was also, they were movement patterns really in my body. So
You know what? I don't want to fluff over that. When you say they were movement patterns in your body, what does that mean? It means you were moving a certain way, and that's how you knew there was trauma stuck there.
so less analytical than that. I mean, again, because I'm trained in movement behavior analysis. I know that, but just to put it more simply, every movement that we do represents a different behavior, a different way that we cope with the world. Like, just if we think about babies, they gesture out.
Mm-hmm.
Their way of communicating is through movement, and that doesn't stop. We're always doing that. We're just maybe, as in the habit of being adults, we kind of repress that a little bit more, or we don't tune it. We're not as tuned into our bodies. But when you think about trauma and the way our nervous systems respond to trauma all these years, fight, flight, freeze, shut down, those are all body responses. And while trauma gets stored in the nervous system in that way, where whenever we're triggered, we might always fight to react, or we might always freeze up. It's not just our survival system responding, our bodies do that too. Like, when we're in a freeze response, we tense up. And so that's why a lot of people with unresolved trauma, they have a lot of pain and tension in their shoulders, and other people experience it in different places in their body. So, some of my patterns were just to, like, be really close to my body, be really small, literally. And so something about learning new behaviors is, if I wanted to be more open, or if I wanted to be more assertive, I can actually practice that in movement. I did practice that in movement, and so do our clients, where if I want to if I want to be more assertive, we can go to couples counseling, for example, and
Mm-hmm.
say, listen, I'm going to be more assertive the next time without flipping out.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
tell you what I need. But then the moment that a conflict or a disagreement happens, that all goes out the window, because the mind wants that, but the body doesn't know how yet. But if I practice like moving around in a space with great impact on the floor, maybe I'm walking with more impact, maybe I'm pushing into the wall with more impact, I can literally feel and sense my power, and get my body and nervous system comfortable with having more power, like more strength, more power, without exploding.
So it almost sounds like you're just more aware of your body and what your body is experiencing, and giving it sort of a way to let this stuff out. How do you know? I mean, you mentioned, tension in your shoulders and stuff like that. How do you know that trauma is trapped in your body?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, it could be a lot of my clients have gone, in terms of pain and body tension and all that. They've gone to a lot of different doctors, a lot of different appointments after appointments, and there's just no medical explanation for what's going on for them. They're frustrated, they can't get answers. That there's trauma stored in your, well, I'll back up and say that, even if you're not sure. So some people do have this feeling like, I know it's stuck in my body. Like, I just feel trapped in my own body. I feel like my body is a prison, and like they have this sensation. But even if you don't know, when we go through trauma and extremely stressful events, this thinking, talking, higher executive functioning part of our brain goes offline.
Mm-hmm.
And so the trauma, the memories, the feelings, they get stored in our body. And so they get stored as fragments of memories that are actually sensations. So this is why when someone, when you're talking with somebody who uses a certain tone of voice, or looks at you a certain way, or even smells a certain way, it's like that little sensation triggers old trauma.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So just research shows that trauma is stored in the body, and if you need, like, if you're not sure, it's like, if you've tried going to counseling, to talk therapy, if you've tried kind of more like mind techniques and they have not worked for you, or they have worked to a certain extent, like they did for me, but like hasn't fully shifted the way that you feel in your body or the way that you behave, you can be pretty certain that it's stored in your body.
And I know, we've spoken on other episodes about somatic therapies, body-based therapies. Would this be considered like a type of somatic therapy or body-based practice, or is something totally different?
So there's similarities, but it's also different. So dance movement therapy is the only psychotherapy that actually uses the creative form of dance and organic, expressive, creative movement. So there is, there is somatic therapy, there is somatic-based healing for trauma, but that is like, what they do is just kind of only the beginning of what we do in dance movement therapy, where they do help you feel more aware in your body and the sensations and all of that. And what I do, what my team does, and dance therapists in general, is it's just beyond that. It's like, when you get into something that you said before was releasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just releasing, although it feels really, feels really releasing and freeing to move your body without all these layers of trauma and the heaviness and all the energy and feelings you've been kind of pushing down all these years. It's just, it's just a whole nother level of expressing yourself, finding freedom. There's a lot of play involved, which has shown to strengthen our nervous system, so that when we're trying to rewire, play strengthens our ability to connect without getting into a fear response.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of movement and play in it that there isn't in other somatic
Right.
psychotherapies.
And I would think that that definitely encourages someone to do it more often. So and I heard of ecstatic dancing. Is this that?
Yeah, so that's also, there's a whole nother realm of conscious dance practices, and ecstatic dance is part of that, where it's just kind of like, well, from what I know, I've done ecstatic dance as well. It's basically like you're going to a nightclub, except there's no alcohol and there's certain rules to make the best out of your dancing, expressing experience. So it's not like that at all. Like especially in the trauma realm, it's not the same to go to a class, to go to a dance class, because trauma is stored in the body. When we start to move our bodies in different ways and in new ways, it's going to inevitably stir up this old trauma that's been stored there. And so if you're doing that in a class or in a non-therapeutic relationship or environment, maybe whoever's listening to this has experienced this already. I have a lot of clients who, before working with me and my team, they've been to retreats where it's like unleash your inner beast, or things like
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
through movement. And they're like, I came back more traumatized than when I went,
Wow.
because that's not helpful. It's not, we don't want to put your nervous system into overwhelm through connecting to your body and movement. It needs to be a gentle, safe accessing the trauma and releasing it.
And so really looking at this as a type of therapy that you would be best off doing with somebody who is trained. I remember early on, pretty early on after my betrayal, I had this treatment, and it wasn't Reiki. It was called something else. It was like deeper Reiki, whatever that is called. I don't even know. And then I went to a yoga class a few days later, and the room was spinning. I was about 10 minutes in. The room started spinning. I thought I was going to pass out, throw up. I don't even know how I managed to get myself out of there, but I did. And I remember, I don't even know how I was able to drive,
Wow.
but I started driving, and I actually pulled myself over on the side of the road, and I just pretty much lost it. And I had no idea what I was experiencing. And then someone said that was a purge. And I guess everything was kind of stirred up, opened up through that session. And then the yoga, it was a gentle movement of the yoga, got it out. And I had never experienced anything like that. And I'll be honest, I was afraid to go back to yoga again after that. So, I mean, this stuff is powerful. So tell us how it works. I'm so curious, like what it looks like, what people experience, how they walk into it, how they leave. Share it
Yeah,
with us.
sure. So I'll start by saying that the experience is unique for every person, because we all store our trauma in a unique way, and we all find that we need to express it in different ways. So I do my work exclusively online, so there's not like a physical coming into the room and out, although I did work in psychiatric hospitals and clinics for almost 10 years. So I did do a lot of the work in person. But right now, I mean, I think it would help to just give some examples of what it can look like. So, from one client, so I'll give an example of one of my clients who witnessed her parents' abusive marriage growing up. And every time now, every time in her marriage today, although it was a healthy, loving marriage, she would literally freeze whenever it was time for her to speak up, to say her needs. And so what ended up happening is she just stayed silent, and it really drew a wedge in their relationship and this disconnection. And so when we started working together, what was helpful for her, what was coming up for her, of course she needed to distinguish that, all right, my husband today isn't the way my father treated my mom. I'm not going to get abused and hurt. she found real healing and power in a lot of different ways of moving and connecting to her body. But one thing in particular that brought back a very important memory from her past is putting more weight, like more impact into her movements. Because as you know, as I've just said, she just froze up. She had no power in her, in her body and her experience. And so you said, how did they start? Well, what I'm about to explain is like, into kind of more into the relationship, more into the process. Because we always start more gently, safely connecting to your body to prevent an experience like you just described in your yoga class, right? To put your nervous system into overdrive and be afraid to ever do this, to get back into the healing. So once establishing a safe connection with her body, we got into these movements, and she started moving with more like stomping and walking with more impact around her space. And I was doing this across the screen in my space. And it wasn't long. She was like, oh my gosh, I just remembered a memory from when I can't remember, I think it was 13, 14 years old, where she literally had to stand between her parents because her dad had a gun in his hand.
Wow.
Yeah. And I was like, it was so powerful because she had been in talk therapy for a while. She had talked about this, but she was not able to access that memory until she tapped into the strength of her own experience. And there's something about that sensation that brought back the memory. And it was such a powerful release for her. It wasn't scary because she had already had that safe connection to her body and with me where I could help her regulate if she needed to.
So it was and just so I'm clear, so it was in the movement. And are you speaking to her as she's moving? Like, just bring us into the process. Like, is there music? Are you speaking? What's going on?
Sure. So in that particular session, there was no music, and I'm always like, there's always some words going on through the movement. So whether that's just me saying, like feel your feet into the floor, what it would feel like if you moved with a little bit more impact, put a little bit more weight. I'm either giving some prompts to help her expand her experience if she's ready. Or again, like it depends on the rapport with the client. They're like, she kind of paused and was like, oh my gosh, this just came up. And I was like, okay, and we pause and we talk about it.
So then this, this question is coming up for me. So what happens if you're doing, let's say, a class and there are a lot of different people in there, or even let's say 5 people, 10 people, and they all have such radically different traumas? The same movement, would that bring up, like, is it that hard stomping, or let's say, is that going to bring up only a certain type of trauma for someone, or do people just bring up what's needed to come up then? How does that work?
Yeah, it brings up whatever's needed to come up. So I do group programs for for this work, and it's a max of 4 people, to really make sure everyone is held safely. And so in my current group program, Let Love In, there's 4 people in there plus me. And, a lot of it is it's not just about movement, it's about moving in relationship. So we'll do things like mirroring or a call and response. Or a huge theme that's going on in my group right now is that, I'm helping them understand these different ways that they can express themselves through movement. And like I was saying before, each of these ways represents how they can actually connect in their relationship. So more assertive, more open, being more direct, being more free, less in control. And the common theme that's coming up, even though it's kind of like they're experiencing it a little bit differently, is that they're so used to accommodating and adapting to other people that they're really not in the true authentic expression of themselves. So I'll have them work in pairs and say, if we've just learned kind of a new way to express themselves, or like two new ways. So, you can either be more like controlled movements or you can be more free. Do whichever one you want as you move with this other person. What often
People
happens,
feel like I could just like I know I'm picturing myself in that class, and I can imagine like I would try it because it sounds so incredibly healing, but I could see myself feeling so awkward and
yeah,
uncomfortable. Yeah. How do you work through that? Is that something that people experience, or is that just me?
no, it's not just you at all. Because like I said, and as we know, when trauma is stored in the body, like the last thing you want to do is connect to your body. It's like, and it's probably been a while since you really have connected deeply to your body, and a lot of people are like, oh, I don't want to move in front of others, and yeah, it's super common, and that is why it's so important to spend a good amount of time, um, just gently, gradually connecting to your body and building that safety and that confidence, which is one of the things that people leave, doing this work, is like feeling confidence in their bodies and in themselves in a way that they never experienced before, feeling comfortable in their bodies, in their own skin.
And do they know something's been released? Is it only because they'll remember a trauma? Do they physically feel different? What happens?
Yeah, it happens differently for everyone, but the common things people will say is like, I feel lighter. All this work is done in such a nonverbal realm, which is one of the reasons why I help them connect it verbally. But a huge piece of feedback is like, there are no words to describe this. It just is magical. But other things is like, I feel lighter. I feel more free. I just feel more like myself. So for people who've been betrayed and have had trauma from a very young age, either never don't even know what themselves mean, or they had a sense of that a long time ago and they've lost it. So feeling more like myself is a common piece of feedback. And then just identifying really important unhealthy patterns that they're having right now, and we change that on the spot in the session. So what I was going to say before was, you move however you want. So if I want to move more freely, but the other person is moving with more control, my pattern might be to adapt to them and please them and move with control and match them. Like this just automatically happens. Um, and then it's like that recognition. And then once you own it, you can be like, you can change it and tap into how you really want to interact and express yourself, even if it's different from the other person. And at the same time, staying connected. So a lot of people will be like, oh my God, where did I go? Like I just left the room. They're checking out, they're dissociating. And so that's part of what I do too, is I remind them through words, sometimes music helps as well, that even if you're doing something different, you stay connected in the relationship, because that's essentially what's going on in the relationship outside their lives, is like they're disconnecting, they're putting their guard up. They either have to super people please or just be totally out of the relationship. It's like black or white.
Right. This reminds me of like, remember in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy had the can of oil and gave it to the Tin Man. I don't know why I just had that visual. I feel like you're giving the oil to the Tin Man, and just loosening everybody up and having them reconnect as well. What do you want to make sure everyone knows as we wrap up?
I think it's important to know that two things, if I can share, is one, if you've been on a journey of trying to heal your trauma for a while and you haven't, you either haven't felt a shift or you haven't felt this full shift that you've really been craving and wanting and needing to have and sustain a healthy relationship, don't give up. And also, it's not your fault, because for a lot of people, talking and doing this work in kind of the mind or verbal realm isn't enough when you've experienced trauma, prolonged trauma or serious trauma. And so it's not your fault. And there is a way to heal that, like really, truly, fully in your body. And also that play is really, really important in all of this. There's a lot of talk about inner child work and all that, and it's so important to do that. And a huge part of that I just love seeing my clients do is actually becoming more playful and silly through movement, through the relationship. We do this in our group as well. And that you don't have to put off having fun or playing until you feel better or until you feel healed. So a lot of people will say, oh, I'll do that once I feel better, right? Or I'll have more fun once I'm healed. And you actually need the play to fuel the healing.
So the play is a part of the healing, and the issues are in the tissues for sure. So where do we go to learn more about you?
Yeah, so I'd love to offer a free gift to your listeners today.
Thank you.
It's my free Wired for Love training. It's an online training to help you understand how you can heal your trauma and how you can rewire your nervous system and break these unhealthy relationship patterns. It's a 3-part video training with a downloadable workbook so that, everything that you learn can also just be applied to, your trauma, your personal history of trauma and your relationship. And it's helped so many people just have this clarity and relief that they've been looking for a really long time. So I hope y'all take me up on it.
That's so great. And where do we find that?
That is at wiredforlovetherapy.com.
Oh, terrific. I want to thank you so much for your time. I know you totally introduced me to something that, I could just picture myself being really awkward and uncomfortable, but willing to try because it sounds incredible. Thank you so much for all you shared with us today.
Thank you, Debbie.
I love the idea of a fun and gentle way to release trapped trauma. And I was so impressed with the idea of this type of therapy that Orit is actually going to be teaching a masterclass for members of the PBT Institute membership community so we can all get moving and have some fun. Stay in touch with Orit by going to oritkrug.com, and we'll have all of her information in the show notes at thepbtinstitute.com/podcast. Here's my biggest takeaway. Trauma stays trapped until it's released, and it's up to us to find the most helpful and healing ways to release it. It's different for everyone, and while everyone has their own recipe for what may have helped them, remember this: working only on one area, let's say talk therapy, is helpful, but it may not be enough. Trauma, even if it's mental, emotional trauma, involves the body, so that needs to be addressed too. Keep trying new things until you find what works well for you. Of course, it's helpful to know what you're working with, so if you're struggling with symptoms, be sure to take the post-betrayal syndrome quiz to see what may be lingering for you at thepbtinstitute.com/quiz. And have you checked out the PBT Institute membership community? Imagine everything you'd ever need to become your physical, mental, emotional best. Community support, certified coaches and practitioners you could schedule time with, daily classes on all kinds of interesting topics, curated experts teaching advanced strategies in the areas of health, mindset, spirituality, personal development. Imagine the most friendly, welcoming, and supportive place to become your best, all online. Nothing like this exists, and I am so excited to welcome you. Just go to thepbtinstitute.com/join to learn more. Thanks for listening. Can't wait to be with you next time, and here's to your breakthrough.